Welcome to English Beta. Let's learn together. English Beta. English Beta.
Good morning. Welcome to our podcast series of English learning.
What if I told you that studying, a really complex new language for just 15 minutes a day will actually rewire your brain faster and honestly, more permanently than grinding through some massive 3-hour study session on a Sunday?
Right. I mean, on the surface, the math just doesn't seem to work out there.
Exactly, because 15 minutes a day, that's only what, 105 minutes a week? You are putting in barely more than half the total time of that 3-hour grind. But human biology fundamentally disagrees with how we traditionally approach learning.
It really does.
So today we're jumping into this highly practical guide titled Master English with Daily Habits, Episode 1. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract these really simple, bite-sized routines from the text and understand the cognitive science behind exactly why they work so well.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating pivot from how we are traditionally taught to acquire skills, right?
Right.
I mean, we are so conditioned by the whole industrial model of education to view learning as this grueling endurance test.
Oh, totally,
Yeah.
like a marathon.
Exactly. But what we were really talking about today is bypassing the brain's natural resistance to cognitive overload.
Which is exactly why this matters for you listening right now. Whether you are actively trying to learn English or maybe trying to resurrect a language you haven't spoken since high school, or you just want to understand the psychology behind acquiring any complex new skill without, completely burning out.
Right, because burnout is the ultimate enemy here.
It is. So this conversation is really designed to completely reframe your approach. We are looking at how to work with your brain's natural biology rather than just constantly fighting against it.
Yeah, and the source material makes a highly compelling case that our standard methodology, the heavy textbooks, the massive memorization sessions, is fundamentally at odds with how human memory consolidation actually functions.
Let's start right there, actually, by dismantling that central myth. Because before we can build up this daily routine the text outlines, we have to clear away the hurdle that prevents most people from ever even starting.
The intimidation factor.
Yes, exactly. When I think about learning a language, my mind immediately defaults to that terrifying image of sitting hunched over a heavy grammar book for 3 hours, just trying to force verb conjugations into my memory until my eyes cross.
Mm-hmm.
It feels exactly like cramming for a college final, right?
The classic cramming model.
Mm-hmm.
It is ubiquitous. But what the source text explicitly calls out is that this method is basically a false premise.
Right.
Real fluency does not originate from memorizing difficult rules in a condensed window. The text really champions the rule of 15 minutes a day over 3 hours a week. And to understand why the 15-minute model wins, we have to look at the physiological response to that 3-hour session.
Well, when you think about it as an organic system rather than a hard drive, it makes perfect sense. Like if I try to dump 3 hours of complex data into a laptop, it just files it away, no problem.
Right, computers don't get stressed.
Exactly. But the human brain doesn't work like that. If I lock myself in a room to memorize rules for 3 hours, my frustration builds. I am essentially creating a high-stress, high-intensity environment, and my brain is going to flag that as an abnormal, overwhelming event.
Yeah, you are triggering a very specific biological cascade there. When you force cognitive overload, your body responds by elevating stress hormones.
Like cortisol, right?
Specifically cortisol, yeah.
Okay.
And cortisol is fantastic if you need to, run from a predator. But it is highly detrimental to the hippocampus.
Which is the memory center.
Right, it's the brain's primary center for memory consolidation. So high stress effectively throws up a massive roadblock in the brain. It prevents those short-term memorizations from being properly encoded into long-term memory.
Oh, wow. So it's like trying to plant delicate seeds in the middle of a hurricane.
That is a perfect analogy.
The environment is just entirely wrong for taking root. The brain is basically treating the study session like a biological fire alarm.
Yeah, the brain in a state of stress prioritizes immediate survival and emotional regulation. It does not care about the retention of past tense irregular verbs.
Right. It's just trying to survive the textbook.
Exactly. But when you switch to the text's model integrating English into your everyday life naturally for just 15 minutes a day, your brain doesn't register an overwhelming threat.
It's just flying under the radar.
Precisely. It perceives the language as a new, safe, normal part of your environment. This state of low arousal and consistency allows the brain to adapt organically. The lack of overwhelm isn't just, a nice psychological comfort. It is a required biological state for long-term memory retention.
Okay, so if our primary goal is to avoid triggering that biological fire alarm, how do we practically map this onto a normal busy day? We need to introduce the language without demanding too much up front.
Right.
And the source text suggests starting chronologically right when you wake up by focusing entirely on auditory intake.
The morning routine. The instruction is highly specific here. While you are enjoying your morning tea or coffee, you just listen to a short English audio or podcast for exactly 10 minutes.
I have to admit, my initial reaction to this advice was immediate skepticism.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, if I am listening to an audio clip in a language I barely know, my instinct is to pause it every 5 seconds to look up the words I don't recognize.
Yeah. The translation trap.
Right. If I'm not doing that, or I just letting unintelligible noise wash over me, it feels like a massive waste of time if I'm not actively translating.
But that instinct to pause and translate is the exact perfectionist trap that causes learners to hit a wall and quit. The source anticipates this anxiety and explicitly instructs the learner, do not worry about understanding every single word.
But mechanically, how does that yield any learning? I mean, if the comprehension isn't there, what is the brain actually doing with that audio?
Well, in that specific 10-minute morning window, your objective is not vocabulary acquisition. The goal, as the text points out, is purely auditory processing. The objective is to let your ears acclimate to the natural rhythm, the sound, and the intonation of the English language.
Just getting the vibe of it, basically.
Yeah, look at the developmental biology of how infants acquire their native language. They don't start with grammar books or flashcards.
That would be terrifying.
Right. No, they spend months in a state of passive listening, just absorbing the distinct music of the language. They map the phones, the distinct sounds, long before they attach any actual meaning to them.
Yeah, I see.
They learn the rising pitch of a question, the pauses between clauses, the overall rhythm of the syllables.
So they are completely mastering the melody before they ever attempt to learn the lyrics.
Precisely. And by pairing this 10-minute auditory session with your morning tea or coffee, you are leveraging a psychological concept known as habit stacking.
Oh, I love habit stacking. You're attaching a new, potentially intimidating behavior to an established, highly reinforcing behavior. Because the coffee is already a deeply ingrained habit that provides a dopamine hit. So by layering the English audio on top of it, you're tricking your brain into associating the language with the comfort of that morning ritual.
Yeah. You are gently waking your brain up to the acoustic properties of English without demanding any high-level cognitive processing. There is no quiz. There is no translation requirement.
Just sipping coffee and listening.
Right. You are simply acclimatizing the neural pathways to the sounds, effortlessly setting a bilingual tone for the rest of your day, all while keeping those stress hormones we talked about earlier completely flat.
Okay, that covers the passive intake. We've primed the auditory pathways and established the rhythm, but eventually, comprehension isn't enough. We have to cross over into production. We have to speak.
You do have to actually use it, yes.
But if we are aggressively avoiding high-stress environments, how do we transition to active speaking during a busy day? Especially if we don't have a native speaker sitting around to practice with.
This is where the guide introduces a technique that is wildly effective precisely because it seems so mundane.
Okay.
It suggests thinking and talking to yourself in English as you go about your day.
Narrating your own life. When I read this part of the text, I realized it is such an elegant solution to a very complex problem.
It really is.
The source paints this beautifully ordinary picture. As you're doing daily chores around the house, you describe what you are doing out loud using the most basic sentences possible.
Yeah.
The text gives examples like, now I'm making tea, or it is a sunny morning today. You are basically walking around your living room narrating a very boring documentary of your own life.
It feels unusual at first,
Yeah.
perhaps even a bit silly, right? But the cognitive mechanics behind why this internal monologue works are profound. The source states that this practice builds a vital bridge between your native language thoughts and your English expression.
When you say bridge, I imagine we're talking about bypassing the brain's internal translation center. Because usually if I want to speak a new language, the cognitive chain of events is exhausting. First, I generate a thought in my native language. Then I pause.
The dreaded pause.
Right. I mentally open my internal dictionary to find the English equivalents. I painstakingly arrange those words according to the grammatical rules I memorized. And then finally, I push the sentence out of my mouth.
And that is the exact process that makes people hate speaking a new language. It is incredibly clunky, it demands massive cognitive load, and it is the primary reason speaking a new language feels terrifying.
Yeah.
You are doing real-time mental gymnastics before every single syllable.
But when I am wiping down my kitchen counter and I say out loud I am cleaning the table, I am wiring the English words directly to the physical objects and actions right in front of me.
Yes.
I am looking directly at the sponge and the table. I'm not translating the concept from my native language. I am generating the concept in English at the exact moment the physical action occurs. I am completely cutting out the mental middleman.
And by doing that, you are fostering true, real-time fluency. In neuroscience, this ties into how motor actions and language centers can reinforce one another.
Oh, fascinating.
Because you are using basic sentences about concrete things right in front of you, the cognitive load drops to near zero. You already deeply understand the context of making tea, so your brain doesn't have to spend energy decoding the environment.
It just focuses on the words.
Right. It can focus entirely on the neural pathway of the English expression. You make that specific pathway faster and thicker every single time you narrate a chore.
And from a purely practical standpoint, the efficiency is brilliant. You are layering a language production task over a physical chore that is already on autopilot.
Yeah, multitasking that actually works.
It requires absolutely 0 extra minutes added to your day. You have to make the tea anyway. You're just adding a tiny vocal layer to it.
It perfectly aligns with the mission of consistency over intensity.
Okay, so listening and speaking cover the intuitive, real-world application of the language. But let's be honest, we still need to internalize structure. English grammar and spelling can be notoriously irregular and, frankly, frustrating.
Very much so.
And we abandoned the heavy grammar books at the start of this deep dive, so how does the text suggest we anchor the actual syntax of the language into our brains?
Well, it introduces a micro-habit designed to engage your visual pathways without inducing fatigue. The text calls it the 5-minute read.
Just 5 minutes.
Just 5. The instruction is to pick up a simple story, maybe a children's book or a short article, and read for exactly 5 minutes a day. And the text pairs this with a highly specific constraint. You have a small notebook nearby, and you are only allowed to jot down 1 or 2 new words.
Wait, only 1 or 2?
That limitation, strictly 1 or 2 words, is the crucial mechanism here.
Okay, if reading for 5 minutes is essentially taking a mental photograph of the language, how does that actually work mechanically? And why the strict constraint? I mean, if I read a fascinating article for 5 minutes, I might easily encounter 10 or 15 words I don't know.
True.
If my goal is to learn, shouldn't I be diligent and write them all down?
Well, think about what happens if you write down 15 words. You have instantly transformed a low-stress microhabit into a demanding chore.
I see.
You have just created a heavy vocabulary list that your brain now feels obligated to memorize, which rockets your cortisol right back up and brings us back to the stress we are actively trying to avoid.
Right. It's an issue of working memory capacity, isn't it?
Exactly. Cognitive load theory dictates that our working memory can only handle a very limited amount of novel information at any given time. If you overload it with 15 abstract new terms, the system essentially crashes.
It just dumps the data.
Right. By limiting your gathering to just 1 or 2 words, you respect the brain's bandwidth. The stakes remain incredibly low. But look at the compound interest here. 2 words a day is over 700 words a year.
Wow.
That is a massive functional vocabulary expansion achieved with absolutely 0 psychological friction.
And regarding the reading itself, unlike the auditory intake of the morning, reading acts like a camera shutter for your visual pathways.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
When you listen, you hear the melody. But when you read, you are exposing the brain's film to the actual spelling and syntax. Because English is so weird and irregular, you can hear a word 100 times, but until you see it physically written out in a sentence, the grammatical structure might not click.
You are providing a visual template. Seeing sentences correctly constructed in a simple story anchors the grammar naturally. You begin to intuit where the adjectives go and how the verbs transform simply by observing them in their natural habitat.
It's just observing, not analyzing.
Exactly. You expose the film just long enough to capture the image without overexposing it and creating a blur of mental fatigue. 5 minutes, 2 words, and you close the book.
Which is such a satisfying way to interact with the text. So now we have built this incredibly efficient, low-stress daytime routine. We have the morning listening, the afternoon narration, and the quick visual reading.
A solid foundation.
But human nature dictates that enthusiasm fades. We are highly likely to abandon this entire loop by tomorrow if we aren't careful. How does the text solve the psychology of actually maintaining this consistency over the long haul?
It addresses the maintenance of the habit loop through the evening review.
Yeah.
The text provides a way to bookend the entire process in the final 2 minutes of your day.
Now, this might be the most deceptive piece of advice in the whole guide because it looks almost too simple to be effective.
It really does.
The instruction is to spend just 2 minutes before you go to sleep reflecting on your day in English. It doesn't ask for a deep philosophical diary entry. It quotes a basic 3-sentence framework. Today was a good day. I learned something new. Now I am ready to sleep.
And at first glance, a language learner might look at that and think, how is repeating those 3 basic sentences advancing my fluency?
Right. If I'm just saying today was a good day, I am clearly not pushing the boundaries of my English vocabulary.
But you aren't trying to push your language skills forward in those 2 minutes. You are managing your psychology. You are pushing your habit loop forward for the next day. To understand this, we have to look at a psychological concept known as the peak end rule.
This is the idea that our brains don't remember an experience based on the entire duration of the event, right? We judge an experience based on how we felt at its absolute peak and how we felt at the very end.
Exactly. Now, think about how people traditionally end a grueling language study session.
Oh, they usually stop when they hit a wall.
Right. They can't figure out a grammar rule, they are exhausted,
Right.
and they just slam the textbook shut in the feet.
They end on a massive negative spike. So according to the peak end rule, their brain stamps the entire concept of learning English with the emotional tags of frustration, failure, and exhaustion.
And because the brain is wired to avoid pain, the next day, when it is time to study, you will experience massive subconscious resistance.
You'll suddenly find you need to vacuum the entire house instead of studying.
Exactly. You will find every excuse to procrastinate because your brain is trying to protect you from that feeling of defeat. This 2-minute bedtime routine completely flips that dynamic.
By finishing your day with 3 simple, successful sentences that you know you can say correctly, you are intentionally manipulating that final emotional stamp. You are ending on a win.
You close the day on a positive and productive note, as the text emphasizes. When you successfully produce those sentences, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, the reward chemical. Your last interaction with the language is associated with a feeling of quiet accomplishment. You go to sleep feeling capable. Emotionally and psychologically, that dopamine reinforcement is the exact mechanism that ensures you will wake up the next morning and happily reach for that 10-minute podcast while you make your coffee.
It creates a perfectly closed, self-sustaining loop.
It really does.
You wake up with low-stress acoustic acclimatization. You bridge the translation gap by seamlessly narrating your physical chores. You take a highly constrained 5-minute visual photograph with a simple book, and you go to bed feeling like a champion with a 2-minute review that guarantees you'll do it all again tomorrow.
It is a masterclass in behavioral design.
Yeah.
It respects the biological limits of the brain while maximizing long-term retention.
So bringing all of this together, I think it perfectly highlights why the golden rule from the source text is so vital. Consistency is infinitely more powerful than intensity.
Absolutely.
Real mastery of a complex skill doesn't require a grueling marathon. It doesn't require a high-stress biological fire drill. It is just a patchwork of tiny, stress-free moments perfectly woven into the fabric of the day you are already living.
And if we step back to look at the broader implications of this text, it leaves us with a highly provocative thought to mull over.
Oh. Where does this lead us outside of just learning English?
Well, if applying just 15 scattered minutes of low stress, daily habits can literally rewire your neural pathways to master something as incredibly complex and notoriously difficult as a new language.
Right.
What other monumental life skills are you currently overcomplicating? What other ambitions are you actively avoiding because you assume you need the heavy textbooks, the 3-hour grinds, and the high-stress environments, when you could simply be mastering them in the quiet margins of your day?
Wow, that is a phenomenal question to leave on. We build these massive, intimidating walls in front of our own progress, assuming that if it isn't painful, it isn't working.
Exactly. No pain, no gain is a myth.
Right. But human biology shows us that you don't need the heavy lifting, you just need a few light stretches every single day. Something for you to think about as you go about your routine today. Maybe even try narrating a few of those chores while you do them. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.